The stagecoach rattled into Wichita, Kansas on a blistering July afternoon in 1878, carrying within it a young woman whose eyes held more sorrow than the dust-choked prairie could ever imagine. Zelda Owens pressed her gloved hand against the worn leather seat, steadying herself as the wheels struck another rut in the dirt road. Through the small window, she caught glimpses of wooden storefronts, hitching posts lined with horses, and weathered men in wide-brimmed hats who paused their conversations to watch the coach pass. Her heart hammered against her ribs, though whether from fear or anticipation, she could not say. 3 weeks ago, she had been in Philadelphia, planning a wedding to a man she thought loved her. Now, she was a mail-order bride traveling to meet a rancher named Garrett York, a stranger who had responded to her desperate advertisement with words that promised kindness and a fresh start. The betrayal still stung like a fresh wound. Thomas had seemed so genuine, so devoted during their courtship. Right up until the moment she discovered him in the parlor with her cousin Margaret, their lips locked in a passionate embrace that shattered every dream Zelda had carefully constructed. The confrontation that followed revealed the ugly truth. Thomas had been courting her for her modest inheritance, nothing more. Margaret, spiteful and jealous since childhood, had seduced him simply to prove she could. The scandal that erupted afterward made remaining in Philadelphia impossible. Whispers followed Zelda everywhere, cruel assumptions about what she must have done wrong, why she could not keep her intended's attention. So she had done the unthinkable. She placed an advertisement in the matrimonial news, offering herself as a bride to any respectable man willing to provide a home out west. Away from the gossip, away from the pitying looks, away from the shattered pieces of who she used to be. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of a building marked as the depot. The driver, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained teeth, opened the door and offered his hand. Zelda accepted it with as much grace as she could muster, stepping down onto the wooden boardwalk on trembling legs. The Kansas heat hit her like a wall, different from the humid summers back east. This heat was dry, relentless, carrying the scent of dust and cattle and something wild she could not name. "Miss Owens," a deep voice called. She turned, her breath catching. The man approaching was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his hat. His face was tanned from years under the sun, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though at this moment his expression was carefully neutral. He wore simple rancher's clothes, clean but well-worn, and boots that had seen countless miles. This was Garrett York, the man who had written her 3 careful letters, each one more thoughtful than the last. "Mr. York," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "I am pleased to meet you in person." He removed his hat, revealing more of his face. His eyes were a striking gray-green, the color of sage after rain. They studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she held his gaze. She had learned the hard way that looking away showed weakness, and she would not be weak again. "The pleasure is mine, Miss Owens. I hope the journey was not too difficult." His voice was gentle, lacking the practiced charm that had made Thomas so dangerous. This was genuine courtesy, she realized. Simple and honest. "It was long," she admitted, "but I am grateful to have arrived safely." An awkward silence stretched between them. Around them, Wichita continued its daily rhythm. A wagon loaded with supplies creaked past. Somewhere nearby, a blacksmith's hammer rang against metal. A woman in a faded calico dress swept the boardwalk in front of what appeared to be a general store. "I have the wagon just here," Garrett said, gesturing toward a sturdy vehicle hitched to 2 patient horses. "My ranch is about an hour's ride north. I thought we might stop at the hotel restaurant for supper first if you are hungry." Give you a chance to stretch your legs before we head out." Zelda nodded, touched by his consideration. Thomas would never have thought about whether she needed to rest. "That would be very kind, thank you." He collected her trunk from the stagecoach driver, hoisting it with ease that spoke of years of physical labor, and secured it in the back of the wagon. Then he offered his hand to help her up onto the seat. His palm was calloused, warm even through her glove, and she felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach that she firmly suppressed. She would not be foolish twice. The hotel restaurant was modest but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of beef stew wafting from the kitchen. Garrett guided her to a corner table, pulling out her chair before taking his own seat. A tired-looking waitress appeared, and he ordered coffee and 2 plates of the day's special without consulting Zelda. She bristled slightly at the presumption, but when the woman left, he looked at her sheepishly. "I apologize. I should have asked what you preferred. I am not accustomed to dining with company." The honesty in his admission softened her irritation. "The stew will be fine." "I confess I have little appetite anyway. The journey has left me somewhat unsettled." He nodded, wrapping his hands around the coffee cup when it arrived. "I imagine this is all very strange for you. Leaving everything you knew to come to a place you have never been, to marry a man you have never met." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I want you to know that I will not rush you into anything, Miss Owens. We can take time to get to know one another properly. The ranch has a spare room where you can stay until you feel comfortable proceeding with the wedding." Tears pricked at Zelda's eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. She blinked them back fiercely. His kindness was almost harder to bear than cruelty would have been. "That is very generous of you, Mr. York, Garrett," he said. "Please, if we are to be married, we should at least use our given names." "Zelda," she replied softly. "Zelda," he repeated, and the way he said it made her name sound like something precious. "I know from your letters that you have been hurt. You did not share the details, and I will not pry, but I want you to know that I believe in keeping promises. When I wrote to you, I promised a home and respect and kindness. I intend to honor those promises." She studied him across the table, this stranger who was offering her a second chance at life. "Why did you place an advertisement for a bride, Garrett? Surely there are women here in Kansas who would be pleased to marry a rancher." A shadow crossed his face. "There was someone, a few years back. Sarah Mitchell. We had an understanding, or so I thought. But when her father lost his ranch in a bad winter, a banker from Topeka came through town. He could offer her things I could not: a house in the city, fine clothes, parties, and society." He shrugged, though she could see the old hurt lingering in his eyes. She chose him. Cannot say I blame her, really. Ranch life is hard, not everyone is suited to it. So he had been betrayed too, in his own way. The knowledge created an unexpected bridge between them. "I am sorry," Zelda said. "Betrayal is a bitter thing to swallow." "It is," he agreed. "But it also taught me to be clear about expectations. When I decided I wanted a wife, I wanted someone who knew what she was choosing. Someone who wanted a simple life, not grand promises I could not keep." The stew arrived, rich and hearty, with thick slices of bread still warm from the oven. They ate in companionable silence for a while, and Zelda found her appetite returning despite her earlier claim. When was the last time she had eaten a full meal? Days ago, certainly. The constant knot of anxiety in her stomach had made food seem impossible. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, setting down her spoon. Garrett's face brightened immediately. "It is not the biggest spread in Kansas, but it is mine. 200 acres of good grazing land with a creek that runs year-round. I run about 100 head of cattle, and I have a small herd of horses I am building up. The house is simple, just 4 rooms, but it is sturdy. I built most of it myself with help from my neighbors. There is a garden plot that has been neglected since my mother passed 2 years ago. She used to grow vegetables and herbs, kept the place feeling like a home. You lived with your mother. I did. My father died when I was 16, leaving me the ranch. Ma stayed on, helped me learn how to run the place properly. She was a strong woman, practical and kind. I think you would have liked her. He paused, a flicker of grief crossing his features. She would have liked you too. She always said I needed someone with intelligence in their eyes. Said a pretty face was not worth much if there was no mind behind it. Zelda felt warmth spread through her chest. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was. Garrett took a long drink of his coffee. What about your family, Zelda? Your letters mentioned you were alone. The warmth vanished, replaced by the familiar ache of loss. My parents died of fever when I was 15. I went to live with my uncle and his family. He was kind enough in his way, but his wife never wanted me there. I was another mouth to feed, another dowry to worry about. When I turned 21 and received my small inheritance from my parents, I moved into a boarding house. I thought I would marry, establish my own household, finally have a place where I truly belonged. Her voice caught. That did not work out as planned. Garrett reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers but not quite touching. Whatever happened in Philadelphia, whoever hurt you, they were a fool. I can see that already. She looked up, meeting his eyes. The sincerity there nearly undid her. You do not know me well enough to say that. Perhaps not. But I know you had the courage to start over. I know you are sitting here having supper with a stranger instead of hiding away from the world. That tells me plenty. He withdrew his hand, picking up his coffee again. Besides, I am a good judge of character. Comes from dealing with horses. They teach you to read honesty pretty quick. Despite everything, Zelda smiled. It felt strange on her face, like a muscle she had forgotten how to use. Are you comparing me to a horse, Garrett York? His eyes widened in mock horror. No, madam. That would be a terrible insult to you and the horse both. Then he grinned, and she saw how it transformed his whole face, making him look younger and approachable. I am just saying I trust my instincts, and my instincts say you are going to fit in just fine here. They finished their meal as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the Kansas sky in shades of orange and gold. Garrett paid for their food, then helped Zelda back up onto the wagon seat. As they left Wichita behind, heading north on a well-worn dirt road, she found herself relaxing slightly. The landscape was vast and open in a way that Philadelphia never was. Here, the sky seemed endless, stretching from horizon to horizon without the interruption of tall buildings or crowded streets. The grass rippled in the evening breeze like waves on an ocean, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out. "It is beautiful," she said softly. Garrett glanced at her, pleased. "It grows on you. The first time I saw the prairie, I was just a boy. We came from Missouri, my parents and I, looking for land to call our own. I remember thinking it was the loneliest place in the world, all that space, all that silence. But Ma said that silence was just the land waiting for us to fill it with life. She was right. Now I cannot imagine living anywhere else." As they traveled, he pointed out landmarks, a distinctive rock formation that marked the boundary of his land. A grove of cottonwood trees where neighbors gathered for summer picnics. The distant roof of the Brennan Ranch, his closest neighbors 3 miles to the east. Jake Brennan and his wife Molly are good people, Garrett explained. They have 4 children, all boys, wild as coyotes but good-hearted. Molly will probably ride over within a few days once word gets around that you have arrived. She has been trying to convince me to find a wife for years now. Does everyone know I am coming? Zelda asked, uncertain how she felt about being the subject of local gossip. Most folks, I would imagine. Small community like this, news travels fast, but they are not mean-spirited about it, just curious. We do not get many newcomers out here. He shot her a reassuring glance. Do not worry, they will like you once they meet you, Molly especially. She is always complaining about being the only woman for miles who can read worth a darn. The sun had nearly set when they finally turned onto a narrower track that led through a gate marked with a simple wooden sign bearing the letter Y. The ranch house came into view as they crested a small rise, and Zelda felt her breath catch. It was indeed simple, a rectangular structure of weathered wood with a covered porch running along the front. But the setting was lovely, nestled near a line of trees that marked the creek Garrett had mentioned. A barn stood nearby, sturdy and well-maintained, and she could see a chicken coop and what looked like a small stable for horses. "Home," Garrett said simply, bringing the wagon to a stop in front of the house. He helped her down, then retrieved her trunk. The front door was unlocked, and he pushed it open, gesturing for her to enter first. Inside, the house was tidy but sparse. The main room served as both kitchen and sitting area, with a cast iron stove, a wooden table with 4 chairs, and a pair of well-worn armchairs near a stone fireplace. Hand-woven rugs covered the plank floor, and oil lamps waited to be lit as darkness fell. "The spare room is just through here," Garrett said, carrying her trunk through a doorway to the left. She followed, finding a small but clean bedroom with a narrow bed covered in a colorful quilt, a dresser, and a washstand with a pitcher and basin. A window looked out toward the creek, where the last light of day glimmered on the water. "It is not fancy," he said, setting the trunk down carefully, "but the bed is comfortable and the roof does not leak much." She turned to face him. "It is more than adequate, thank you, Garrett." He nodded, suddenly awkward in the enclosed space. "Well, I will let you settle in. I need to tend to the horses and check on the cattle. I left them in the near pasture, but I want to make sure none wandered off. There is bread and cheese in the kitchen if you get hungry later. Help yourself to anything you need." "Garrett," she called as he turned to leave. He paused in the doorway. "Thank you for being patient with me, for not expecting me to simply arrive and immediately become your wife. I know this arrangement is unusual enough without my complications." His expression softened. "Take all the time you need, Zelda. I am not going anywhere and neither are you. We will figure this out together." After he left, Zelda sank onto the edge of the bed, her composure finally cracking. The enormity of what she had done washed over her. She was in Kansas, hundreds of miles from everything familiar, in the home of a man she had met mere hours ago. Yet somehow, impossibly, she did not feel afraid. Lonely, yes. Grief-stricken over her shattered dreams and broken trust, absolutely. But not afraid. There was something solid about Garrett York, something genuine that Thomas had never possessed. She rose and unpacked her trunk, hanging her few dresses in the small wardrobe and arranging her personal items on the dresser. Her fingers lingered on a small silver locket, the one piece of jewelry she had kept from her mother. Inside were tiny portraits of her parents, their faces forever young in the painted miniatures. "I hope I am doing the right thing," she whispered to their images. "I hope you would understand." The sound of Garrett moving around outside drew her to the window. She could see him in the fading light, hauling water from the well, checking the barn, moving with the easy confidence of a man who knew his place in the world. He stopped by the chicken coop, scattering feed, and she heard him speaking softly to the birds, his voice carrying on the evening breeze though she could not make out the words. Over the next few days, they established a tentative routine. Garrett rose before dawn to tend the animals and ride out to check his herd. Zelda woke to find coffee already made, still warm on the stove, and a fire started to take the chill off the morning air. She began by tidying the house, which hardly needed it, then turned her attention to the neglected garden. The weeds had taken over, but beneath them she found the remnants of what had been a well-planned plot. Tomato stakes still stood, though the plants were long dead. Herb beds outlined in stones waited to be replanted. She borrowed tools from the barn and set to work. The physical labor was harder than anything she had done in Philadelphia, but there was something satisfying about it. About putting her hands in the dirt and pulling out the unwanted growth, about creating order from chaos. It felt metaphorical somehow, as if she were weeding her own heart, pulling out the roots of betrayal and hurt to make room for something new. Garrett found her there on the third day, kneeling in the dirt with her sleeves rolled up and perspiration dampening her brow. He stood watching for a moment before she noticed him, and when she looked up, startled, he was smiling. "You did not have to do this," he said. "The garden, I mean. I know it is a mess." She sat back on her heels, brushing a strand of hair from her face and likely leaving a streak of dirt in its place. "I wanted to. I hope you do not mind. Working with growing things always helped me think back home. My mother kept a small garden behind our house. Some of my best memories are of helping her tend it. I do not mind at all. It makes the place look more like it used to." He crouched down beside her, examining her work. "You have made good progress. Ma would be pleased to see someone caring for her herb bed again." "I was thinking I might go into town next week and buy some seeds," Zelda said tentatively. "If that would be acceptable. I have some money left from selling my belongings before I left Philadelphia." "You do not need to spend your own money," Garrett said immediately. "Anything the house needs I will provide. That was part of our agreement." "It was not, actually," she pointed out gently. "You offered a home and respect and kindness. You said nothing about providing luxuries like garden seeds." He grinned at her. "Vegetables are not luxuries, Zelda. They are good sense. Fresh food is cheaper than buying everything from the general store. Besides, I have been meaning to get the garden going again. Just never had the time or the knowledge. Plants seem to die when I look at them wrong." She found herself smiling back. "Then perhaps we have found something I can contribute, a fair trade for room and board while we become acquainted." "It is already more than a fair trade. The house has not felt this alive since Ma died." He stood, offering his hand to help her up. She took it, noting again the strength in his grip, the calluses that spoke of hard work. "Come inside and wash up. I brought back fresh milk from the Brennans. Molly sent over a cake too and a not-so-subtle invitation for you to come visit whenever you are ready." Over cake and coffee, Garrett told her about his visit with the Brennan family. How the boys had peppered him with questions about his bride-to-be. How Molly had given him a knowing look and told him not to mess this up, or she would never forgive him. How Jake had clapped him on the shoulder and said it was about time he had someone to share the load. "They sound like good friends," Zelda said. "The best. When my father died, Jake helped me keep the ranch going that first hard year. I would have lost everything without him. And Molly practically adopted me after Ma passed, made sure I did not starve or wear clothes with holes in them." He paused. "They are the closest thing to family I have now. I hope you will like them." "I am sure I will." Zelda set down her cup. "Garrett, may I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever regret this? Sending for a mail-order bride instead of courting someone naturally?" He considered the question seriously. "Honestly, no. I thought I might, but I do not. This way we both know what we are choosing. No pretense, no trying to be something we are not to impress each other. We are just two people trying to build a life together with honesty. That seems more solid to me than romance built on moonlight and pretty words." His answer stirred something in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. "Thomas was very good with pretty words," she said quietly. He recited poetry and brought me flowers and told me I was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and it was all lies. Every word designed to manipulate me into trusting him. Garrett's jaw tightened. This Thomas sounds like a fool and a scoundrel. He was both. She took a shaky breath. I found him with my cousin. They were in my uncle's parlor and they did not hear me come in. I stood there watching them kiss, watching her laugh at something he whispered, and I felt my whole world collapse. When they finally noticed me, do you know what he said? What? He said it was my fault. That I was too serious, too bookish, that I did not appreciate him properly. That Margaret knew how to make a man feel wanted. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over. And part of me believed him. Part of me thought maybe if I had been different, better, more like Margaret, he would have loved me the way he promised. Before she knew what was happening, Garrett had moved around the table and pulled her into his arms. She stiffened in surprise, but he just held her gently, one hand cradling her head against his shoulder, the other resting lightly on her back. "Listen to me, Zelda," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Whatever that man said to you was poison. You are not too serious or too bookish. You are intelligent and strong and brave enough to start over when your world fell apart. Any man who could not see that, who would betray you that way, is not worth a single one of your tears." She sobbed against his shirt, releasing weeks of pent-up grief and anger and hurt. He held her through it all, steady as the land outside, letting her cry until she had no tears left. When she finally pulled back, embarrassed and exhausted, he released her immediately but kept one hand on her shoulder. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I did not mean to fall apart like that. Do not apologize. You have been holding that in too long." He handed her a handkerchief from his pocket. "Feel better?" She dabbed at her eyes and discovered that she actually did. Yes, I think I do." "Good." He returned to his chair, giving her space. "For what it is worth, I am glad Thomas was an idiot. Otherwise, you might be in Philadelphia planning your wedding instead of here in Kansas planting my garden." The absurdity of the statement surprised a laugh out of her. "That is a strange thing to be glad about. Maybe, but it is honest." He met her eyes across the table. "I know it is too soon and you are not ready to trust anyone yet. I understand that. But I want you to know that I see you, Zelda. The real you, not some idea of who you should be. And what I see is someone worth knowing." Her heart fluttered again, that dangerous feeling of hope growing stronger. "You barely know me, Garrett. I know enough. I know you garden when you are sad. I know you take your coffee with a little sugar but no cream. I know you read late into the night because I can see the lamplight under your door. I know you are kind to the chickens and patient with my terrible cooking." He smiled. "I know you are healing from something that hurt you badly, and I want to help if you will let me." That night, lying in her narrow bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the prairie, Zelda allowed herself to think about possibility, about what it might mean to trust again, to open her wounded heart to someone new. Garrett was nothing like Thomas. Where Thomas had been smooth and charming, Garrett was rough-edged and sincere. Where Thomas had made grand gestures, Garrett offered quiet, steady presence. Where Thomas had demanded she change to suit him, Garrett seemed to appreciate her exactly as she was. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The next morning, she woke to find Garrett waiting in the kitchen with the wagon hitched and ready. "I thought we could go into town together," he said. "Get those seeds you wanted, maybe some other supplies. I need to talk to the banker about selling some cattle, and you could meet some of the townspeople. Only if you feel ready." Zelda had dressed in her best day dress, a deep blue cotton that brought out her eyes. She had pinned her dark hair carefully, wanting to make a good impression on the town that would be her new home. "I am ready." The ride into Wichita was pleasant. the morning air still cool before the heat of the day set in. Garrett kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out different plants and birds, telling her stories about the land and the people who lived on it. She found herself relaxing, even laughing at his tale about a rooster named Napoleon who terrorized everyone who came near the hen house until Molly Brennan showed up one day and stared the bird into submission. "Molly has a way with animals," Garrett said, "and people, and pretty much everything else. She is a force of nature, you will see." In town, Garrett introduced her to the shopkeepers and townspeople they encountered. The blacksmith, an enormous man named Samuel who spoke in a surprisingly soft voice. Mrs. Chen, who ran the general store with efficiency and a sharp eye for quality. Reverend Matthews, who welcomed her warmly and mentioned that he would be happy to perform their wedding ceremony whenever they were ready. Each person greeted her with genuine friendliness, and if there was curiosity in their eyes, there was no judgment. At the general store, Garrett insisted on buying not just seeds but also fabric for new curtains, a set of good cooking pots to replace his battered ones, and a beautiful set of hand-bound books that Zelda had been admiring when she thought he was not looking. "Garrett, this is too much," she protested as Mrs. Chen tallied up the purchases. "Nonsense. A house needs curtains, and those pots were older than I am, and you need books. I see how you look at them." He paid without waiting for further argument, then helped carry the packages out to the wagon. They were loading the last of the supplies when a woman's voice called out, "Garrett York, you had better introduce me to your bride right this instant, or I will never speak to you again." Zelda turned to see a blonde woman striding toward them, determination in every step. She was pretty despite the practical clothes and the flour dusting her apron, with laugh lines around her blue eyes and a smile that radiated warmth. 4 boys of varying heights trailed behind her like ducklings. "Molly Brennan, meet Zelda Owens," Garrett said with obvious affection. "Zelda, this is the woman I was telling you about, and that horde of wild animals behind her are Michael, Patrick, Daniel, and young James. Ma says we cannot call ourselves wild animals even if it is true," the oldest boy, who looked about 12, said seriously. Molly reached out and took both of Zelda's hands in hers. "Welcome to Kansas, dear. I am so pleased to finally meet you. Garrett has been walking around with a smile on his face for days now, and I can see why. You are even lovelier than he described." Zelda blushed. "He described me? Oh, yes. Could not shut him up about your letters, about how intelligent you seemed, how honest." Molly winked. "I knew you would be good for him." "Now, Molly, do not go embarrassing us both," Garrett said, but he was grinning. "Nonsense. Someone needs to embarrass you. You are too serious by half." She turned back to Zelda. "You must come to supper soon, tomorrow if you can. I want to hear all about Philadelphia and show you off to Jake properly. He met you briefly when you first arrived, but that hardly counts." "We would be happy to come," Zelda said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. They made plans for the following evening, and Molly extracted a promise from Zelda to visit again soon, just the two of them, for tea and proper conversation. "It is wonderful having another woman nearby who appreciates good talk," she said. "The boys are darlings, but their conversation is limited to horses, fishing, and who can spit the farthest." The ride home was quiet but comfortable. Zelda found herself thinking about Molly's words, about Garrett talking about her letters with such enthusiasm. She glanced at him from the corner of her eye, noting the way the sun caught in his dark hair, the strong line of his jaw, the capable hands holding the reins. "Did you really tell Molly about my letters?" she asked. He kept his eyes on the road, but she saw the faint color rise in his cheeks. "I might have mentioned them once or twice, or a dozen times. They were the best part of my week, getting a letter from you." The way you wrote about books and ideas, about the world beyond Kansas. It made me think I might not bore you to death with ranch talk." "You could never bore me," she said softly. "The way you talk about this land, about the animals and the seasons, it is clear you love it. There is nothing boring about listening to someone speak of their passion." He turned to look at her fully then, something intense in his gray-green eyes. "You are remarkable, Zelda Owens. I hope you know that." Her breath caught. Before she could respond, he had already turned back to the road, leaving her to wonder if she had imagined the warmth in his voice, the promise in his gaze. That evening, after a supper of beans and cornbread that Garrett apologized for at least 3 times, Zelda sat in one of the armchairs near the fireplace with one of her new books. Garrett settled into the other chair, mending a bridle that had cracked. The domesticity of the scene struck her. This was what a marriage could be, she thought. Not grand passion and sweeping declarations, but quiet evenings working side by side, comfortable in shared silence. "Garrett," she said, lowering her book, "I think I am ready to set a date. For the wedding." His hand stilled on the leather. He looked up at her, searching her face. "You are certain? I do not want you to feel rushed." "I am certain." And she was, she realized. "I came here to marry you and build a life. I cannot do that if I keep hiding in fear of being hurt again. You have been nothing but kind and patient and honest with me. I would like to move forward if you still want that." "Want that?" He set aside the bridle and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Zelda, I have wanted that since I read your first letter, but I need you to understand something. When we marry, it is forever in my eyes. I do not believe in breaking promises, especially vows made before God and community. I will be your husband in every sense, and I will expect you to be my wife. I will provide for you and protect you and care for you all the days of my life. Can you promise me the same?" She met his serious gaze without flinching. "I can. I want a real marriage, Garrett, a true partnership, not an arrangement of convenience. If I am going to do this, I want to do it properly." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming it once again. "Then let us talk to Reverend Matthews this Sunday. See if he can marry us next month. That gives us time to prepare, for you to be absolutely sure. I am sure now." "A month anyway," he said firmly. "We can use the time to get to know each other better. Court properly, even if we are doing it backward." The next evening they rode to the Brennan Ranch, a sprawling property that made Garrett's holdings look modest by comparison. The house was larger, 2 stories of whitewashed wood with a wide porch where Jake Brennan stood waiting. He was a big man, tall and barrel-chested, with red hair going gray at the temples and a booming laugh that carried across the yard. "Welcome, welcome," he called as Garrett helped Zelda down from the wagon. "Molly has been cooking all day. I think she means to impress you." Inside, the house was noisy and warm, filled with the energy of 4 active boys and the mouth-watering smell of roasted chicken. Molly presided over the chaos with calm efficiency, directing her sons to set the table while she pulled bread from the oven. Over dinner, the conversation flowed easily. Jake told stories about the early days of settlement, about floods and droughts and neighbors helping each other survive. Molly asked Zelda about life back east, genuinely interested in hearing about theaters and libraries and city life. The boys mostly focused on eating, though young Daniel, who appeared to be about 8, shyly asked Zelda if she knew any stories about pirates. "I do, actually," she said. "My father used to tell me one about a pirate queen who ruled the Caribbean. Would you like to hear it?" 4 eager faces nodded, and even the adults leaned in as she recounted the tale, embellishing it with dramatic details that made the boys' eyes grow wide. When she finished, Michael declared it the best story he had ever heard, and Patrick begged her to come back and tell them more. After the meal, while the boys cleared dishes, Molly pulled Zelda aside. "Let us take a walk," she suggested. "I want to show you my garden and we can have that talk I promised." They strolled through Molly's impressive vegetable garden as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of rose and purple. Molly pointed out different plants, sharing tips about what grew well in Kansas soil and what struggled. "I am glad you came here, Zelda," Molly said as they reached the far edge of the garden. "Garrett is a good man, one of the best I know, but he has been lonely since his mother passed. He needed someone." "He told me about Sarah," Zelda said, "the woman who chose someone else." Molly made a dismissive sound. "Sarah Mitchell was a fool. She wanted easy comfort, not a real partner. You are different. I can see it in how you look at him, how you listen when he talks. You see him." "I am trying to," Zelda admitted. "It is difficult trusting again after being hurt." "But Garrett makes it easier. He is exactly who he claims to be. That is Garrett, honest to a fault." Molly picked a ripe tomato, brushing off the dirt. "Can I give you some advice, woman to woman, please? Let yourself love him. I know you are scared and you have every right to be. But Garrett will not hurt you the way you were hurt before. He does not have it in him. And life is too short to hold back when you have found someone worth loving." Tears stung Zelda's eyes. "How do you know I will love him?" Molly smiled gently. "Because you are already halfway there. I see it in your eyes when you look at him. You just have not admitted it to yourself yet." That night, lying in bed, Zelda thought about Molly's words. Was it true? Was she falling in love with Garrett York? The idea should have terrified her, but instead it filled her with a cautious warmth. He was a good man. Kind, hardworking, honest. He made her laugh. He respected her mind. He held her when she cried and gave her space when she needed it. He was nothing like Thomas, and that was precisely why her heart was beginning to open to him. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Zelda threw herself into preparing for the wedding. Sewing a simple but elegant dress from fabric Mrs. Chen helped her select. Garrett worked on fixing up the house, repairing the shutters and building new shelves in the kitchen. They rode into town together to meet with Reverend Matthews and arrange the ceremony. In the evenings, they sat together and talked, really talked, sharing stories about their lives. Garrett told her about growing up on the ranch, about his father's stern but fair discipline, about his mother's gentle wisdom. Zelda spoke of her childhood in Philadelphia, of her parents and the happy years before fever took them, of the harder times that followed. They also began to touch more easily. A hand at her back as he guided her through a doorway, her fingers brushing his as she handed him his coffee, his arm around her shoulders as they stood on the porch watching a thunderstorm roll across the prairie. Each touch built familiarity, comfort, a growing awareness of each other as man and woman rather than simply two people sharing a house. One evening, about 2 weeks before the wedding, they were sitting on the porch steps watching the sunset when Garrett took her hand properly, lacing his fingers through hers. "I know we are getting married in a fortnight," he said quietly, "but I want you to know that I care for you, Zelda. Truly care for you. This stopped being just an arrangement for me somewhere around your second letter." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "When did you know? You wrote about missing your mother's garden, about how tending growing things made you feel connected to her memory. And I thought, here is someone who understands loss but has not let it make her bitter, someone who finds beauty and meaning in simple things. I wanted to meet that person, and now that I have, I want to spend my life with her." She turned to face him fully, still holding his hand. "I care for you too. I did not expect to. I thought I would come here and we would have a practical arrangement, maybe friendship in time. But you have given me so much more than that. You have given me a home, yes, but also kindness and patience and space to heal. You have helped me remember that not all men are like Thomas, that promises can be kept and hearts can be trusted. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Instead of answering, she leaned in and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle, tentative, both of them learning the shape and feel of each other. His hand came up to cup her cheek, calloused fingers tender against her skin. She felt warmth bloom in her chest, spreading outward until her whole body hummed with it. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to be a good husband to you, Zelda. I promise you that." "I know," she whispered, "and I am going to be a good wife to you." The wedding took place on a perfect September morning, with the air crisp and cool and the sky a brilliant blue. Zelda wore her new dress, simple white cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs that she had stitched herself. Molly had helped her pin wildflowers in her hair, creating a crown of purple and gold. The ceremony was held at the small church in Wichita, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Jake Brennan stood up with Garrett, while Molly served as Zelda's attendant. The 4 Brennan boys sat in the front row, scrubbed clean and dressed in their Sunday best, though young James kept fidgeting with his collar. Reverend Matthews spoke about partnership and commitment, about building a life together through good times and hard. When he asked Garrett to make his vows, the rancher's voice was steady and sure. "I, Garrett York, take you, Zelda Owens, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you and honor you all the days of my life. I promise to work beside you and support you and cherish you. I promise to be honest with you always, and to build a home with you that is filled with love and laughter. This I vow before God and these witnesses." Zelda's voice trembled slightly as she made her own vows, but her eyes never left Garrett's face. "I, Zelda Owens, take you, Garrett York, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you and honor you all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner in all things, to stand beside you through whatever comes. I promise to trust you with my heart, even though that scares me, because you have shown me that you are worthy of that trust. This I vow before God and these witnesses." When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Garrett kissed her sweetly, his hands gentle on her waist. The small congregation erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration afterward was held at the Brennan Ranch, with tables set up in the yard laden with food that neighbors had brought. There was music, with Jake pulling out a fiddle and playing lively tunes that had everyone dancing. Garrett proved to be a surprisingly good dancer, spinning Zelda around until she was breathless and laughing. As the sun began to set, they said their goodbyes and headed home to the ranch that was now truly theirs together. Garrett helped her down from the wagon and then, without warning, swept her up into his arms. "Garrett," she gasped, grabbing his shoulders for balance. "Tradition," he said with a grin. "Got to carry you over the threshold." He carried her into the house and set her gently on her feet in the main room. The oil lamps were already lit, and she realized he must have asked Jake to come by earlier and prepare things. There were wildflowers in a jar on the table, and the good quilts had been put on their bed. Their bed, she thought, not the spare room anymore. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly, brushing a stray curl back from her face. "A little," she admitted, "but not afraid, not with you." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and she felt heat kindle in her belly. When his hands moved to the buttons at the back of her dress, she did not stop him. Instead, she reached up and began unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly but determined. They undressed each other slowly, between kisses and whispered words. Garrett was patient, attentive, making sure she was comfortable every step of the way. When they finally came together as husband and wife, it was with tenderness and care, so different from the rough, selfish coupling she had heard other women whisper about in Philadelphia. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the lamplight, Garrett's arms wrapped around her and her head resting on his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, matching the rhythm of her own. "I love you," he said into the quiet. "I know it is fast, and maybe I should not say it yet, but it is true. I love you, Zelda." Joy burst through her like sunrise. "I love you too. I was not sure when it happened, when I stopped being afraid and started hoping, but I do. I love you, Garrett York." He held her tighter, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You are never going to regret taking a chance on a Kansas rancher, I promise you that." "I already know I will not," she said, tilting her face up to kiss him. "You have given me everything I thought I lost. A home, a purpose, a partner. A future. You have helped me believe in love again." They made love again, slower and more confident this time, learning what pleased each other, building the physical intimacy that would become one more thread in the tapestry of their marriage. The months that followed were not without challenges. The winter was harsh, with snowstorms that left them housebound for days at a time. They had a few arguments, learning to navigate each other's stubborn streaks and differences of opinion. Twice, Zelda found herself crying over small things, old wounds resurfacing unexpectedly. Each time, Garrett held her and talked her through it, never making her feel foolish for her tears. But there was joy too. So much joy. Lazy Sunday mornings in bed, working side by side in the garden as spring arrived, planting vegetables and herbs. Evenings spent reading aloud to each other, Zelda sharing her beloved books while Garrett listened with genuine interest. Nights tangled together, exploring the pleasure they could bring each other. Molly became her closest friend, riding over several times a week for tea and conversation. The Brennan boys adopted Zelda as a sort of honorary aunt, always eager to hear her stories or show her some treasure they had found. Jake and Garrett worked together during calving season, and Zelda helped Molly with the enormous task of feeding all the extra ranch hands. Word came from Philadelphia in the spring. A letter from her uncle informing her that Thomas and Margaret had married in a hasty ceremony after Margaret found herself with child. The marriage was reportedly miserable, with Thomas's gambling debts mounting and Margaret complaining constantly about the disappointment of her circumstances. Her uncle wrote that people often asked about Zelda and seemed to have realized, too late, that she had been the wronged party all along. Zelda read the letter once and then burned it in the stove. That life, those people, they belonged to someone else now. Someone who no longer existed. She was Zelda York now, and her life was here in Kansas with a husband who loved her and a community that had embraced her. In late summer, nearly a year after her arrival in Wichita, Zelda realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another month to be sure before telling Garrett, wanting to be certain before raising his hopes. When she finally shared the news, he let out a whoop of joy and spun her around the kitchen, both of them laughing and crying at once. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to be parents." "You are going to be a wonderful father," she said, cupping his face in her hands. "Just like you are a wonderful husband." The pregnancy was difficult at times. Zelda suffered from terrible nausea in the early months, and later, as she grew larger, the Kansas heat made her uncomfortable. But Garrett was attentive and patient, taking over more of her usual chores without complaint, bringing her cool drinks, rubbing her swollen feet in the evenings. Molly, who had birthed 4 children, became an invaluable source of advice and reassurance. She helped Zelda prepare, showing her how to make clothes for the baby and what supplies to have on hand. She promised to be there when the time came, to help with the delivery. On a cold March morning in 1880, after a long night of labor, Zelda gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Garrett was there throughout, holding her hand and whispering encouragement even when she cursed him for getting her into this situation. When the baby finally arrived, crying lustily, Molly placed him in Zelda's arms. "You have a son," she said with a tired but radiant smile. Garrett stared at the tiny red-faced infant with wonder in his eyes. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect, just like his mother." They named him Garrett York after Garrett's father. From the beginning, he was a happy baby, quick to smile and surprisingly calm. Garrett proved to be a natural father, never complaining about late-night feedings or dirty diapers. He would walk the floor for hours with Gabriel against his shoulder, singing old songs his mother had taught him. Watching her husband with their son, Zelda often found herself overwhelmed with gratitude for the path that had brought her here. The betrayal that had seemed like the end of her world had actually been the beginning of something far better. Thomas had broken her heart, yes, but Garrett had mended it gently, piece by piece, until it was whole again and capable of more love than she had ever imagined. 2 years later, they had a daughter, whom they named Grace after Garrett's mother. She was a spirited child, always getting into mischief, keeping them on their toes. Gabriel adored his little sister, taking his role as big brother very seriously. The ranch prospered. Garrett expanded the herd and built a larger barn. Zelda's garden grew to impressive size, producing more vegetables than they could use themselves. She began selling her excess produce in town, using the money to buy books for a small lending library she established at the church. The neighboring women began gathering there once a month to discuss literature, and these meetings became a cherished part of the community. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch steps watching Gabriel and Grace chase fireflies in the twilight, Garrett took Zelda's hand. "Do you remember that first day when you stepped off the stagecoach looking so scared and brave all at once?" she smiled. "I remember thinking you looked kind, and hoping desperately that I had not made a terrible mistake. And now I know it was the best decision I ever made." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You kept your promise, you know. You mended my broken heart gently, so gently I barely noticed it healing until it was whole again." "You did the same for me," he said. "I did not realize how much Sarah's betrayal had hurt until you showed me what real love looked like, what real partnership felt like." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play, listening to the evening sounds of the prairie. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. A night bird called. The creek babbled over stones on its eternal journey. "I want more," Zelda said suddenly. "More what?" "More of this. More evenings watching our children play, more mornings waking up beside you, more of building this life together." She turned to face him. "More children too, if we are blessed with them. I want to fill this house with love and laughter." Garrett's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "That sounds perfect to me, though maybe we should build an addition first. That spare room is not so spare anymore with Grace in it." She laughed. "Always practical. Someone has to be." He kissed her softly. "I love you, Zelda York, more today than yesterday, and I will love you even more tomorrow. And I love you. Thank you for taking a chance on a broken-hearted woman from Philadelphia. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely rancher from Kansas." He stood, pulling her up with him. "Come on. Let us get these wild children to bed so I can show my wife properly how much I appreciate her." The years continued to unfold with the steady rhythm of ranch life. They had 2 more children, another boy they named Henry and a second daughter named Hope. The house grew with additions as needed. Gabriel learned to rope and ride, following his father everywhere. Grace showed an early talent for training the gentler horses. The younger children brought their own joys and challenges. Zelda never heard from her family in Philadelphia again, and she found she did not mind. Her real family was here in Kansas, built not from blood but from choice and love and daily commitment. Molly's boys grew into fine young men, and Zelda took pride in knowing she had played a small part in their upbringing through her storytelling and library. Garrett's ranch became one of the most successful in the region, not through aggressive expansion but through careful management and a reputation for honest dealing. People knew that Garrett York's word was his bond, and that reputation made him prosperous. On their 10th anniversary, Zelda stood in the garden she had first reclaimed from weeds a decade earlier. It was lush and productive now, surrounded by a white picket fence Garrett had built. Herbs and vegetables grew in neat rows. Flowers bloomed along the borders, adding color and beauty. She heard footsteps behind her and smiled as Garrett's arms came around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "There you are. I was wondering where you had wandered off to." "Just thinking," she said, covering his hands with hers. "Remembering that first summer when I tore out all these weeds, trying to make sense of my new life. And have you made sense of it? More than sense. I have made a home, a family, a future I never dreamed possible." She turned in his arms, looking up at his dear, familiar face. The lines around his eyes were deeper now, and there was gray threading through his dark hair, but he was still the man who had promised her kindness and kept that promise every day since. "Any regrets?" he asked, though his smile suggested he knew the answer. "Not a single one. You?" "Only that I did not send for you sooner. Think of all the time we could have had together." She reached up and pulled his head down for a kiss. "We have time now, the rest of our lives." "The rest of our lives," he agreed. "And I plan to spend every day of it showing you that you made the right choice. You already have, my love. Every single day you already have." From the house, they heard the children calling for them, voices rising in some minor dispute that would need parental intervention. They laughed together, breaking apart reluctantly. "Duty calls," Garrett said. "It always does." She took his hand. "Come on, let us go see what crisis has erupted now." They walked back to the house hand in hand, two people who had started as strangers, become partners, and now were so intertwined they could not imagine life apart. The journey had not always been easy. There had been hardships and losses, difficult seasons and lean times. But through it all, they had each other. They had built something real and lasting from the broken pieces of their past hearts. As evening fell over the Kansas prairie, the York family gathered around the dinner table. Gabriel, now 12, was telling a story about a snake he had found near the creek, making it sound far more dramatic than it probably was. Grace, 10 years old, rolled her eyes at her brother's exaggeration but listened anyway. Henry and Hope, the younger two, focused primarily on their food but chimed in occasionally with important observations about their day. Zelda and Garrett exchanged glances across the table, the kind of wordless communication that comes from years of marriage. In those glances was love, yes, but also gratitude, contentment, and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived together. Later, after the children were finally in bed and the house was quiet, they sat together on the porch as they had so many times before. The stars blazed overhead in the clear Kansas sky, countless points of light in the darkness. "You think Gabriel will take over the ranch someday?" Zelda asked, her head resting on Garrett's shoulder. "Maybe. Or maybe he will want something different, same with the others. I want them to have choices, to find their own paths." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Like we did. I never thought of myself as choosing a path. It felt more like running away. Maybe it started that way, but you chose to stay, chose to trust me, chose to build this life with me." Those were brave choices, Zelda. She thought about the frightened young woman who had stepped off that stage coach so long ago, broken-hearted and desperate. That woman seemed like a stranger now. Or perhaps not a stranger, but a younger self she had outgrown, like a snake shedding old skin. "I was so angry at Thomas for so long," she said quietly. "Angry at him for betraying me, at Margaret for her cruelty, at myself for being foolish enough to trust. And now I am grateful, not for the hurt but for where it led me. If Thomas had not shown his true nature, I might have married him. Spent my whole life with a man who did not truly love me in a place where I did not belong. I would never have known what real love felt like." She lifted her head to look at him. "I would never have known you." Garrett's eyes shone in the starlight. "Sometimes I still cannot believe you are real, that you chose me. We chose each other, and I would make that choice again every single day." They kissed under the stars, two middle-aged people still as much in love as newlyweds, perhaps more so for having weathered life's storms together. When they finally went inside, it was hand in hand as they did everything. The seasons turned as they always did on the prairie. Spring brought new calves and endless work. Summer meant long, hot days tending the ranch and the garden. Autumn was harvest time, putting up food for winter and selling cattle at market. Winter brought cold and hardship, but also cozy evenings by the fire, the family drawn close together against the elements. Through it all, Garrett and Zelda remained each other's constant. They supported one another through challenges, celebrated victories together, and found joy in the small moments that made up a life. Morning coffee shared in companionable silence, teaching the children to read and rope and everything in between, dancing in the kitchen when the mood struck them. Making love with the practiced ease of long intimacy. Years passed. The children grew. Gabriel did indeed take over more and more of the ranch work, developing a real talent for it. Grace surprised everyone by showing an aptitude for veterinary medicine, learning from the traveling vet who passed through regularly. Henry became a gifted carpenter, always building something. Hope, the youngest, showed signs of inheriting her mother's love of books and learning. Jake and Molly grew older alongside them, their boys marrying and starting families of their own. The community expanded as more settlers arrived, but the core group remained close, bound by years of shared history and mutual support. On a warm summer evening in 1895, Garrett and Zelda celebrated their 17th anniversary with their grown children and a passel of neighbors. The ranch yard was filled with tables laden with food, and someone had brought a fiddle for music. Gabriel danced with his sweetheart, a sensible girl from a neighboring ranch. Grace was locked in animated conversation with the vet about a difficult horse birth. The younger children ran wild with their friends, as children always did at gatherings. Molly found Zelda in the kitchen, putting together more food. "Leave that for a moment and come sit with me," she commanded. "It is your anniversary. You should be celebrating, not working." Zelda laughed but obeyed, following her friend out to the porch where they could watch the festivities in relative quiet. 17 years, Molly said, shaking her head. "Seems like yesterday you stepped off that stagecoach looking like a scared rabbit." "I was terrified," Zelda admitted. "I had no idea what I was doing, coming out here to marry a stranger." "Best decision you ever made, though. The very best. Second only to accepting your friendship." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two women who had weathered life together, who knew each other's secrets and sorrows and joys. "You ever think about that other life?" Molly asked. "The one you left behind in Philadelphia, sometimes, but it feels like it happened to someone else." "That Zelda, the one who trusted the wrong man and had her heart broken, she does not exist anymore." "She does," Molly said gently. "She just healed and grew and became you. All those experiences made you who you are." Zelda considered this. "I suppose you are right." I would not wish that pain on anyone, but I cannot regret it entirely. Not when it brought me here." Garrett found them there a while later, sitting side by side in the twilight. "There is my wife hiding from her own party." "Not hiding," Zelda protested. "Just taking a moment to appreciate it all." "Well, come appreciate it with me. I want to dance with my bride." He offered his hand with exaggerated formality. Zelda took it with a smile, letting him pull her to her feet. "I am hardly a bride after 17 years. "You will always be my bride," he said, leading her into the yard where others were dancing. "From that first day until the last, you will always be the woman I chose to spend my life with." They danced as the stars came out, surrounded by family and friends, by the life they had built together through love and hard work and unwavering commitment. And if Zelda's eyes grew damp with happy tears, well, she was not the only one. Garrett held her close, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The music played on into the night, fiddles and laughter and the sounds of community. Children eventually fell asleep in their parents' arms. Young couples stole kisses in the shadows. Old friends told stories they had told 100 times before, comfortable in their familiarity. When everyone had finally gone home and the children were in bed, Garrett and Zelda stood together in the quiet of their bedroom. He helped her out of her dress, his fingers familiar with all the hooks and buttons. She unpinned her hair, now shot through with silver, and let it fall around her shoulders. "Happy anniversary, my love," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Happy anniversary," she replied, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. They made love with the tender familiarity of long marriage, knowing exactly how to please each other, finding comfort and passion in equal measure. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Zelda felt a profound sense of peace. "What are you thinking?" Garrett asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That I am the luckiest woman alive. That coming to Kansas was the best thing I ever did. That loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life." "Not so much of an adventure," he teased gently. "Pretty quiet life out here on the prairie. The best adventures are not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes they are quiet and steady and built on 1,000 small moments of love and trust." She lifted her head to look at him. "Every day with you has been an adventure, Garrett York, and I would not trade a single one of them." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you, Zelda. More than I have words to express." "Then do not use words. Just keep showing me every day the way you have been. That is more than enough." They fell asleep tangled together, as they had every night for 17 years, two hearts that had been broken and mended, now beating in perfect synchrony. The years continued their steady march. Children grew into adults and left to build their own lives, though none strayed far from the ranch that had been their childhood home. Gabriel married his sweetheart and started his own spread just a few miles north. Grace pursued her interest in animal medicine, becoming the first female veterinarian in the region. Henry built houses all over Kansas, his craftsmanship sought after. Hope went to a teaching college and returned to establish a proper school in Wichita. Grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch house with new laughter and noise during visits. Garrett and Zelda settled into the rhythm of their later years, still working the ranch but with Gabriel doing much of the heavy labor now. They spent more time in the garden, took long walks by the creek, sat on the porch in the evenings watching the sun set over land they had loved and worked for decades. On their 25th anniversary, their children arranged a grand celebration. People came from all over the county, testimony to the respect and affection the Yorks had earned over the years. There were speeches and toasts, stories and laughter, and a beautiful cake that hope had somehow managed to transport from Wichita without destroying. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, Garrett led Zelda back to the porch steps, their favorite spot for important conversations. 25 years, he said, wonder in his voice. A quarter of a century. It seems impossible and inevitable all at once. I know what you mean. It feels like no time at all and like forever, both at the same time. He took her hand, the hand he had held countless times before, and turned it over to press a kiss to her palm. I meant every promise I made to you, Zelda, but I think I have gotten more out of this marriage than I ever gave. You made me a better man. You gave me a family, a purpose beyond just surviving. You turned a house into a home. We did those things together, she said firmly. That is what partnership means, building something better together than either could alone. Still, I want you to know that marrying you was the smartest thing I ever did, and loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. Tears streamed down Zelda's face, but they were happy tears. I came here with such a broken heart, so much hurt and anger and fear. I thought I would never trust anyone again, never let anyone close enough to hurt me. But you were so patient, so gentle. You showed me that love could be different, safe, real. You mended my broken heart, Garrett, piece by piece, until it was whole enough to love again. And then you filled it so full of love it overflows. They held each other as the stars came out, two people who had taken a chance on each other when they had every reason to protect their wounded hearts. They had chosen courage over fear, hope over cynicism, and built a love that had weathered every storm. No regrets, he asked, as he had many times over the years. Not a single one, she answered, as she always did. This life, this love you, it is everything I never knew I needed. Everything I never dared to hope for. You kept your promise, Garrett York. You mended my broken heart gently, and then you loved it so well it never broke again. And you kept yours. You became my partner in every sense, my best friend, the love of my life. We built something good here, Zelda. Something that will outlast us. They sat in the comfortable silence of long companionship, watching the Kansas sky turn from purple to black, the stars emerging one by one. Around them, the ranch settled into its nighttime rhythms. In the barn, horses shifted in their stalls. The creek continued its eternal murmur. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote sang to the moon. Inside the house, the evidence of their 25 years together surrounded them. Photographs on the walls showing the growth of their family. Books lining shelves Garrett had built. Quilts Zelda had stitched. 1,000 small objects that told the story of their shared life. Come to bed, Garrett said finally, standing and offering his hand. We are getting too old to sit on hard steps all night. Zelda laughed and let him pull her up. They went inside, locking the door behind them, leaving the night to itself. In their bedroom, they prepared for sleep with the easy familiarity of decades together. As they settled into bed, Zelda curled against Garrett's side, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. This position, this closeness, it was as natural as breathing now. Garrett, she whispered into the darkness, thank you, for answering my advertisement all those years ago, for being exactly who you claimed to be, for loving me so well. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely rancher, for choosing to stay when you could have run, for building this beautiful life with me. He pressed a kiss to her hair. I love you, Zelda York, today, tomorrow, and all the days after. And I love you, always and forever. They drifted off to sleep, hearts full, lives complete, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something extraordinary from broken pieces. Outside, the Kansas prairie stretched endlessly under the stars, the land they had worked and loved and made their own. And in a simple ranch house with a garden full of life, two people slept peacefully, wrapped in love that had started with a letter and grown into something that would echo through generations. The mail-order bride who had arrived with a broken heart had found not just healing, but a love deeper and truer than she had ever imagined possible. And the rancher who had promised to mend it gently had kept that promise every single day, building a life and a love that was their greatest legacy. Together, they had proven that broken hearts can heal, that trust can be rebuilt, and that the greatest love stories are not the ones that come easily, but the ones that are chosen day after day with intention and commitment and unwavering devotion. And so they lived, and so they loved, and so their story became part of the land itself, a testimony to the power of second chances and the transformative nature of gentle, honest love.